What I want to talk to you about in this section, and we're going to go from this slide number 46 to slide number 55. And what I want to go over in this section is not only and not just the points of the Monroe Doctrine or when it was issued, and obviously it was issued by President Monroe, but it was not written by him, and I'll go over that, but why? And as I often say, President Monroe didn't just get out of bed one morning and decide to issue or offer this statement, which, as you read it, and if you don't understand the background, it sounds very belligerent. It is a very nationalistic statement. But we have to appreciate why he went to the length of drafting such a document. So in this slide, there's a lot of things going on in this slide here. And first, of course, since I did this, I like this one statement here about him wondering here and going, well, trouble brewing in Europe. Well, what does that mean? President Monroe was the last of the Virginia dynasty. He was Secretary of State to the previous president, who was Madison. Madison was Secretary of State to the previous president, who was Jefferson. So they are all of the Virginia dynasty. They are well educated. They are well versed in international diplomacy. Most of them speak several languages and are comfortable with being in Europe. Now, Monroe also has a huge advantage because as his Secretary of State, he has John Quincy Adams. And John Quincy Adams, if I'm correct, I believe he speaks 9 languages, including Greek and Latin. And John Quincy Adams, is very comfortable being in Europe. So he, of all Americans, truly understands the dynamics of Europe. What are those dynamics? Well, let's look up here and think first about Spain. And this issue, the question of Spain, really is the heart of the background of the Monroe Doctrine. Because if you think about it, and I'm going to go to another slide here, if you think about it, the Monroe Doctrine, Spain's empire is crumbling. From back in the 1500s, Spain was one of the leading countries for exploration in the world in the 16th and 17th centuries. And at this point, back in the 19th century, as far as the United States is really concerned, we are posed with Spanish territories, interacting with Spanish territories, namely Florida. And this has already been done in the 1819 Adams-Onis Treaty. And the question of Texas, and the question of this other territory up here to the southwest, which is, as we know today, the state of California, Nevada, Utah, parts of Arizona, and all of New Mexico. But these are Spanish influence, plus the country of Mexico down here. Now, Mexico has revolted and separated from Spain, as have most of the territories in Central America and down in South America. So Spain, and this is the point, Spain is gradually losing her grasp on the North American continent. And secondly here, there is a bloodline here that's held together by the monarchies. And the monarchies, very much so, are concerned about Spain very much retaining her status in the world. The bloodline is, of course, the royalty. So we have the Quadruple Alliance. The Quadruple Alliance, which is France, Austria, Russia, and Prussia. Now, Prussia is the area that we commonly think that is current day is between the Ural Mountains in Russia and Central Europe and Austria. It is a Germanic region, but is also influenced in the past by White Russians, so to speak. And the area of Prussia the country of Prussia no longer exists. And these groups got together and formed what is known to us as the Holy Alliance. So what is all of this about? because of the bloodlines and the lineage over here, the royalty of Europe, now that again spreads the royalty of Europe, the bloodlines, and these are all cousins and first cousins and second cousins and aunts and uncles, are all related through the bloodlines of the royalty. So they are concerned, sorry about that, they are concerned about Spain losing her influence. And they think that if they get together, and they get together in what is known as the Conference of Verona. Now there are in effect, or there were in effect, several of these so-called Conferences of Verona. But I have chosen to speak of one in November 1822. And the bloodline, are concerned about, of course, Spain retaining control. And so here is the scheme. The scheme is for the bloodline to prop up somehow Spain, so that Spain doesn't lose control of her territories, especially in the Western Hemisphere. Why? Because they want to make sure that, and they don't so much care about North America, although they do, about the United States that is, but they are concerned about Great Britain. So, in the event that Spain loses control, then there creates a power vacuum. In that power vacuum, the lineage wants to make sure that the lineage, the Holy Alliance, retains control. Why not Britain? Because Britain, as you know, or may not know, split from the Roman Catholic Church of this lineage and created the Church of England. So even though there's bloodline to England, there is a split because of the church. It's a very complex story. Now, British Foreign Secretary Canning is acutely aware of all of these comings and goings in the Congress of Verona. And, of course, Britain is very interested in retaining any sort of influence in North America. Now, of course, we're beyond the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. So Britain and the United States aren't really keen about going to war again. However, Britain has a strong eye, definitely, on having claims back here in North America. Now, what's up for grabs still? This Oregon Territory is still, we agreed upon in a convention with Great Britain, that we would decide this in a number of years, but British and American citizens are allowed to settle in the Oregon country, and the idea is to keep out Russians. No Russians. This whole territory is Spanish controlled, and this goes all the way down here to South America, but the countries in South America are rather unstable. They still are today. So Great Britain certainly has their eye on here, as do our leaders in Washington. So what to do? So Canning approaches the United States through our Secretary of State, who is John Adams, and says, let's gang up on these guys, ally with us, and then we will prevent, no matter what happens with Spain, we'll prevent them from moving forward. So, in summary, Britain did not necessarily want to see revolutionary governments in South America. Why? Because they want to trade. They want to begin trading in South America. Britain did not want to have or see expanded French or Spanish power in the New World. And believe it or not, under the guidance of the Congress of Verona, France was actually encouraged to, quote-unquote, this is in quotes, invade Spain in 1823 to try to put King Ferdinand of Spain back in control against a constitutional government forced upon him. Now, if you have watched Amistad, and you that was assigned at this point, you know that by the time of the Amistad trial, which is during the Van Buren presidency, which is the late 1850s and 40s and 50s, we know that Queen Isabella is back in power, so that the royalty is back in power in Spain, although their power is definitely waning. So, now, here is the key point here. Foreign Minister Canning, this is Great Britain. He tries to gain an agreement from France not to gain territories from Spain, either by cessation or acquisition. So what does that all mean? Well, Canning is doing a lot of things, and which is what a good foreign secretary does. He is going to France and saying, and talking to the French and saying, we would like an agreement with you so that you do not go to any former colonies of Spain, that you don't take them over. Why would France do that? Especially since they just got done fighting Great Britain. They're not friends. The reason is that France, because of the Napoleonic Wars, is pretty much out of money. So they really do not have any choice in the matter because of lack of funds in there. And this is called the Polignac Agreement, and the Polignac Agreement is an Anglo-Franco, English-French agreement that France agrees not to basically bother herself with it to conquer or annex any Spanish-American colonies in the Western Hemisphere. And this whole memorandum, the Polignac Memorandum, is a document by George Canning, the British Foreign Secretary. So while Canning is busy doing that, he is also talking to the United States. The United States is watching this very carefully, and eventually the question is, well, should we not just ally ourselves with Great Britain? And that's a great question. And it is John Adams who basically, and there is no doubt at this time, now he may not be a great, well-liked man, as you know from your readings and profiles in courage, but he is an expert. And it is John Adams who says bluntly, and I'm going to paraphrase, why do we need to follow England? Why would we as an emerging country choose to follow England? And this is a direct quote. It would be more candid. It would be more upfront of us to say, and more dignified, to avow our principles, to talk our principles explicitly to Russia and France. Let's talk directly to them. Why do we need to follow Great Britain? As he says, a cockboat in the wake of the British man of war. And basically he's talking about, look, here's this great big ship that Britain is used to, and why would the United States be this little rowboat behind here being towed along by the great British Navy? Why do that? And it is John Adams, JQA, who advises Monroe to say, you know what, we don't need to do that. Let's go it alone. It is for that reason, and not necessarily belligerence, that we get to the Monroe Doctrine, which has 4 points. So again, let me summarize again. The Monroe Doctrine is really a reaction to all of the intrigues in Europe, beginning with the country of Spain. Spain, power is decreasing. There will be a power vacuum in the North American continent, in the Western Hemisphere, should Spain falter, and she does. With the powers that be in the royalty, they want to make sure that these territories do not come under British influence. But the French really cannot do anything because their coffers, their money is spent because of the Napoleonic Wars, which leaves it up to basically Great Britain and the United States. Adams says, let's go it alone. And we get to the Monroe Doctrine, which is issued in 1823, and a State of the Union address by Monroe. Now, it was never known as the Monroe Doctrine to several decades later, but it has 4 main points here. First, The American continents, he says, are no longer to be considered as subjects for future colonization. This is future. In other words, European powers stay out. You can no longer come over here and develop colonies in the future. Second, there exists in the Americas now, 1823, a political system that's unique. And this means it's not royalty. And it's not monarchies. It's not parliamentary. It is different and largely democracies. Thirdly, and this is very militaristic and nationalistic, the U.S. would consider it dangerous to its peace and safety, any attempt on the part of European powers to extend their system to any point in the Western Hemisphere. And fourthly, as a concession, the U.S. would agree not to interfere with existing colonies or dependencies on world powers, and we will not interfere in international matters of European nations. We will not take part in European wars. So that is, in essence, the Monroe Doctrine, but again, far more importantly, is how President Monroe and John Quincy Adams got to that point.